And I'm recording.
Well, thank you both for coming in.
Thank you.
And ahead of time, I'll just say it, but really appreciate you guys putting yourself out there in the public spotlight to serve. It's really commendable. To start off with, we just would like just a brief, what made you decide you wanted to run, and what's your passion for jumping in and hoping to be a school district candidate? So, Liz?
I come from a long, rich tradition of educators. My grandfather was a teacher, my dad was a teacher, my brother's a teacher. My mom worked in schools as a secretary, and I'm married to a teacher, and I was a teacher myself. And I've been actively engaged in education my entire adult life. Not in the classroom any longer, but I believe that education is a lifelong pursuit. And recently I have come to believe that decisions that are made at the local level, whether it's city council or a city committee or a school board, those decisions matter a great deal in our everyday lives. We can all be distracted about things that are happening on the national level, but where my energy, I think, can best be utilized is by working at the local level.
I'm currently on the school board seeking a re-election for my term. Originally, it took me 4 times to get elected the first time. And the reason why I did that, I've been an educator for a while, and a vocational educator. I've been advocating vocational education for probably over 30 years, and a lot of now as the education system is starting to lean more towards vocational STEM and CTEs than they ever have. I'm a graduate of Long Beach State, and when I took classes there, they put out some staggering statistics that only 20% of our high school graduates go to a college or university right out of high school. So the question was, what are we doing for the other 75 to 80%? And for many years it hasn't been enough. My main subject that I taught was automotive, so that was quite, my methods of instruction was quite different than an academic class. However, one statement that I've made to several science teachers is that I had the biggest physical science laboratory in school with automotive, and I'm very concerned about all of our young people having the best education possible to be available. The second thing on my list is to assure that parents and taxpayers, their money is spent wisely. One of the big reasons why I wanted to get on the school board, I saw some inequities in that situation. The academic world has basically messed up some of our education system. Now they're trying to fix it, and for the most part, a lot of them don't even have a clue. So that's why I got into it, because I was brought up, if you don't like something, instead of making a lot of noise about it, do something about it. That's why I'm on the board now. If you look at my record, you'll see that there's been several 4-to-1 votes. I've been the 1 votes because I'm just not a rubber stamper. If it's the best thing for our community and our children and our taxpayers, yes, I'll vote for it. But if it's not, I have a dissenting opinion that I feel that I've had a lot of influence on my colleagues because their opinions are a lot of traditional educators, and I'm not a traditional educator, so it makes for a balance, and I think I speak a lot for more of the conservative people of the community that you don't hear a lot about.
Thank you. So we just want to start with just a really broad question. Tell us what you believe the role of a school board and a school board member is and how you'll fit into that. And we could start with you again, if you'd like, Johnny.
school boards are there to set policies and to hire a superintendent that will administer those policies as they're laid out. Some of the policies are set down by the state, so each school district has their own take on amending the policies to fit the needs of the area. Our needs here in Redmond will be a little bit different than what they'll be in Salem or Portland, so we have to adjust accordingly. One of the things that we've done on the school board is we tried to establish a good rapport between administration and staff. We've had some meetings to be able to, the board is setting the standards, administration is trying to see how it's going to be delivered, and then staff are the people that is delivering. And then we're taking assessing how successful we are at the end of it, and we're in the process of doing that right now.
Thank you.
I agree with Mr. Corbin that the role of the school board is to set policy and to hire the superintendent and to monitor successes and achievements and deficiencies as well. You know, it's two very important tasks that a school board is given, and that's spending the taxpayer money wisely and educating a community's youth. I mean, those are two very weighty tasks. I think I would fit in on the school board. I think I'm a team player. I think also something that the school board should always do is engage with the community. You know, you're not just implementing what you think should be done, but you need to take the pulse of the community and find out what the community is interested in. And implementing the needs of the community is something I think is critical. And I think that Mr. Corbin mentioned the 4-to-1 votes. I too agree that dissent is always healthy in a public board. But then when the decision's made, I think it's the board's responsibility to get on the same team and move the ball forward.
Thanks. Anywhere you want to start, Aaron?
Yeah. Why don't we start with PERS? One of my feelings about a school board is, in addition to setting policy, you also serve as an advocate for your community, and people within the community look to you with regard to being somewhat of an expert on issues around education and education funding. With that in mind, with the problem that we have regarding PERS at the state level, I would like it if each of you could not speculate, but at least give your opinion regarding what the state should be doing with regard to PERS.
Well, PERS is obviously a big problem, a situation. There are obligations that have already been made that have to be paid. And school districts are left to responsibly spend the remaining portion of the pie that we have. You know, PERS and PERS reform needs to be taken care of at the state level. And I think we can be as educated as we can about it, and we can advocate for change by calling our representatives and legislators. But I think wisely focusing on how to spend what's left in our local school district is where I think our energies are best spent.
There's been a faction that took and created PERS because of their selfishness, and now it's coming back to bite the entire state. I'm a big advocate of Senator Knopp and how he's been trying to reform PERS. He's been getting a lot of resistance because the group that created PERS and got everything all messed up doesn't want to let it go. I can understand that because they're riding a gravy train. They don't want to discontinue it. And I'm very much for the things that they're trying to put in, like the new Bilotti rule. And you should be familiar with what that's all about. is what all it's gonna do is just take money that we need for our classroom and give it to retirement for people that are not doing anything other than being retired, you know. And in Bellatti's case, now he was making more on retirement pay than he was when he was in the classroom. So, you know, those are things, basically, you know, PERS is a big elephant in the room. How do we solve it? It's a really touchy situation because of the way that it was structured by those selfish people in the first place.
Can you, when you mentioned you supported Senator Knopp's plan, just for the folks watching the video, just describe a little bit about that?
He's the one that has been pushing the Bellotti rule.
Okay, so that's the part here.
That's part of it, yes, and to fund PERS differently and taking those who are freshly coming on PERS and changing the rules so it's not so much of a burden to the taxpayers, because that's ultimately who pays the bill, is the taxpayers.
Can I respond?
Yeah, you know.
I categorically just reject the notion that public employees are greedy or selfish. And I do know that the PERS moving forward, they have addressed it by, and I'm a public employee, full disclosure. I'm a tier 2, and I know that tier 3, anybody hired after 2004 maybe, they even have a different way of addressing. It is fixed going forward. It's the unfunded mandate of all that we have agreed to with those public employees. And I think that there must be some creative ways of getting that, the tier 1 folks and the tier 2 for that matter, getting them through retirement with what we have, you know, honoring our obligation to our public employees that do amazing work in communities around the state.
Do you believe that the state should reform the obligations that they have to employees in the past, or should everything move forward?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
When PERS was originally established, like I said, it was a few selfish that took advantage of the entire public. And the worst part of the PERS system is the university and college systems that are well overpaid. And give you a good example, the University of Oregon's salary is around $800,000 plus perks. The President of the United States salary is $400,000 plus. What's wrong with that picture? Now, who's worth more, the President of the University of Oregon or the President of the United States? And it doesn't matter who the President is of the United States, but that's the way it's been set up.
Are you referring to the president of the UOO is 800,000?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Is he worth $800,000? I don't think so. I mean, yeah, they're bringing in lots of money at whose expense? Taxpayers, public, students, and parents that are paying the bills. And what are they getting for their money? I cringe at some of these programs that they have that when they get out, they're useless programs. Some of the liberal studies are very useless programs. Now and I give you an example of a good program is I was went to Long Beach State with industrial arts. So when I got out, I had a useful information to go forth in my area. Where if you have somebody who, in history, unless you're going to teach history, what good is it other than you learned how to learn? Employers, that's the only thing they look at a college graduate. They learned how to learn. What actual knowledge do they have in different areas?
Yeah.
Could be very sketchy.
I think learning to learn is pretty important.
Right.
And as an employer,
I'm not denying
no,
that.
and I think that we would both agree that. Are we going off script? Should we go back on script?
Well, I mean, I think going off script into the higher education realm probably is not where we want to spend our time today, because you know, you guys are in charge of K through 12, or would be in your case, Liz. So we probably should stick to that.
I got it. So, Liz, I think we asked you what this one to start, so I'll come here. Bullying is a major issue in school districts. Do you see the board taking a role in that?
Secondary. Now, most of the schools are addressing that up front. Unfortunately, you put the biggest blame on bullies on parents in the way they've reared a lot of their children. We have to change the outlook upon some of these children, and I think most of the buildings are doing a pretty decent job of trying to corral it, but there's some that's going through the cracks, and I do know for a fact that when these situations are being brought up, that they're being taken care of in-house as much as possible.
Do you have specific examples of how those are being taken care of in buildings?
I'm not there.
Mm-hmm.
So each individual situation is different, and I really, that's not my field of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
I do know when I was in the classroom, if I had somebody who was out of control, which wasn't very often because of the subject matter that I taught, they were gone.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious
I
if
let
there's
administration
certain
take care of
best practices that as a board member you might support in terms of handling that.
Well, in the 4 years that I've been on the board, I think we've only had about 2 or 3 issues that have come to the board because the parents have appealed it. So it gives you an idea that most of the stuff is being taken care of in-house.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while I'll get an email that says that so-and-so is being bullied but has been taken care of in-house. Or it gets to the superintendent, and then he steps in and is the mediator of the situation. If it gets past the superintendent, that's where the board is the final say so. And like I said, we've only had 2 or 3 in the 4 years that I've been on board.
Liz, what do you think?
Yeah, I think bullying is a whole new, I grew up in a time when bullying was not even remotely, a whisper of a thing that kids have to endure these days. And whether it's bullying in person or bullying online, I think that schools, each building needs to have a policy in place that's ready to go. And I don't know if that's true or not, whether or not Redmond schools do have policies in place, but then they need to be implemented, and students need to be held accountable for their behavior. And a lot of times I think our knee-jerk reaction to dealing with bullies is to come down heavy on them, and I agree that there need to be consequences for bullying, but I think also that the reason that the kids are bullying maybe is that they've got some issues that need to be addressed as well. And what's their situation at home? Are they bullying because they don't have any other way to assert themselves? Bullies need to be not handled. Don't get me wrong. Bullies need to be held accountable and dealt with. But there might be some other story that needs to be heard. But every school should have a policy in place that's ready to go. And bullying includes racism, homophobia, sexism, gender bias, and all of that. And they all need to be dealt with in a very clear, set forth policy that each school should have ready to go and deploy when it happens.
From my input, from what I've gotten so far, bullying is pretty much handled in most of the schools. And it's absurd to say that bullying is something new, because I was bullied when I was in school, and I've been out of school over 50 years.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's new.
It's some of the methods have changed because
powerful.
of the technology and the methods, but bullying's been around, and it's been dealt with all along at different levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess, just to both of your points, I'm curious if the school board's role is to set policy, and we are in a changing society, like what are those policies that you would support in terms of supporting?
It's not board policy, it's state policy. The state has set the policy for bullying.
Mm-hmm. And I think a board can set a tone.
Mm-hmm.
That this is not tolerated in our
mm-hmm.
schools. We are a welcoming place for students, and this is not acceptable, and our buildings have policies in place, and we will support those policies.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The Redmond attempted to get a bond for aging school, and from what we're aware, it primarily went down due to a lot of the voters in the Crooked River Ranch area. How do you feel about that bond? Are you prepared to go back up to the bond? How do you get the funds needed for your schools? Liz, I think.
Yeah, I was disappointed when the bond failed. And I read through, they prioritized the things that they were looking to fund. Were there things in there that I didn't agree with? Certainly. But I was in favor of that bond. Whether or not the board moves forward with putting it out there again is going to be an interesting thing. There are a lot of public service groups out there, a lot of public agencies, entities that are all looking for funding right now. The park's going up, there's rumor of a library one, there's rumor of a public safety one, and they're all so critical to the health of our community and how we're going to grow. And I think that we in Redmond are looking at an opportunity right now to get ahead of the growth curve. We know we're growing. And do we do these things, do we put these dollars in play now when we can make a difference before we get behind the curve? Or do we wait until they come and then getting back ahead is difficult and it's more expensive? I think that Lynch School is not safe. I think there's a lot we can be doing to improve the safety of our other buildings. And I was disappointed. And I would work on behalf of the school district to get a bond passed should it be put forward again.
Just to start, the board has decided that we will have a bond next year. Now, in my opinion, because of my part in this last bond, I got it closer than it would have been otherwise. If you looked at what was on...
So you supported the bond?
I supported the bond, but if you look at what was on the part of the wording of the bond was an oversight committee. I would not give them my vote until that was part of the bond. I didn't like the numbers. Much of the community didn't like the numbers.
Too high?
Not so much too high, but some of this, a lot of the negative comment, particularly my generation, you're not going to justify $2 million for artificial turf. Even though it might be equitable, you're not going to justify it.
Right.
The other portion of it is 4 years ago when I went on the board, I made a statement that the school district was not sensitive enough to two different groups, and sometimes they're one of the same, seniors and veterans. The school district has done a much better job with veterans. Seniors, no. Our current superintendent has volunteers, and he only takes the volunteers that he wants. We've got seniors out in the community that want volunteers, and they're turned away.
Why is that?
Because they don't fit into the scheme of our superintendent, and he's the one that calls the shot on it. And I've called him on it several times. That there are seniors in the community that have a vast knowledge and time to be able to help in our schools. And I've been turned down every time that I have mentioned that.
Does the rest of the board support that effort?
They were mute.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't get any response from them.
Mm-hmm.
The political analyst came from Portland and started analyzing all the numbers. And there was two areas that the numbers were down where they should have been, but he didn't ask the questions correctly. And after he got all done, I said, "You're not asking the correct questions. Why the undervote didn't vote at all, and what it's going to take them to get them to vote yes. Why those like myself that are on fixed income voted no, and how are you going to get them to vote yes?"
Right.
I had a very difficult time getting numbers out of our superintendent of what everything was going to be spent money for. And did you hear that there's Lynch was going to be tore down with the exception of one wing that was gonna be, that's usable and was gonna be rented out. Most people never heard that. So the information that is
But you
being,
think they would have supported it if they had heard that?
there would have been more support because the consensus of the people said, well, they're not gonna turn down that one wing and rent it out. Well, that seems to be pretty frugal with our funds.
You know, I do want to keep going on this side note. So seniors are always a challenge for school board. It's you know,
school
they're
bonds.
I'm part of it.
bonds, sorry.
Yeah.
And what is it that that you feel would get seniors to support in Redmond to support something?
I've already made it public at the meeting. You have to justify what you're spending. You're not gonna justify $2 million for artificial turf to seniors. They wanted to see it go to education, not to replace the bleachers in Obsidian Middle School when maybe all they need is just to be repaired or upgraded. Things like that. Spending, you know, what the seniors look at as spending money frivolously. I believe that Lynch should be tore down and rebuilt, with the exception of that one wing.
But did other seniors in your community support that?
When
Sounds
I
like they didn't.
When I explained it to the few that I talked to, yes. Obsidian Middle School, the building is in pretty good shape, but inside's a mess.
Yeah.
Tumalo's 100 years old, that speaks for itself. Tuck is, 60, 70 years old, that kind of speaks for itself. Now, we have buildings that need roof repair, HVAC needs attention, and when it comes to safety, I'm all for those. But those are not the things that people on the PAC and the school district administration would try to sell. That's where I tried to sell.
Yeah, I don't want to get.
I think seniors are a challenge, and here's what we know about numbers, is that Redmond population grew by 3% last year, and school enrollment stayed flat. So you have a population without kids in the public school system that's growing. People maybe feel a little less invested, but I think the effort needs to be made to message that these are all everybody's kids, and raising, educating, and sharing the burden of those kids, that's a community's responsibility. And strong public schools are a cornerstone of our democracy. And if we take those things seriously, then we need to step up. I think that the timing of the bond in the fall was problematic. People had just gotten their tax statements, and the next week were asked to vote, and people had, saw. And it's hard, but taxes are used to do wonderful things for the public. And I think that messaging that keeping our youth educated is important to the Redmond community.
But it sounds to me like the point he's making is that the bond itself, not the timing, though that does sound horrific.
Yeah.
It was more of the allocation of what those funds were going to go to.
Well, it was a big bond, but I will tell you, as somebody who's in favor of bonds and taxes and public schools and public services, when I see that there's 3 unretired bonds, school bonds on my tax bill, that's tough. And it's a political as much as it is a financial decision, and it was a big bond. It was big. All of it, I think, maybe not. Some things were a little grating, but I think that school districts always make that choice. Like, do you go for the whole enchilada, or you just go for the smaller enchilada, but know you're going to have to come back for another portion of the enchilada in a short period of time? Mm-hmm. And I think they opted for that, and I don't disagree, but it was a little.
There currently is only 2 bonds on the book right now.
Or 2, okay.
The first bond will be done in '24, I believe. And by that time, the school will be ready to build another school. Mm-hmm. And the way I've inquired, it will probably be up in the northwest side of town, probably an elementary and another middle school up in that area of town, because there's no elementaries in that area of Redmond at all, up in the northwest side of town. But it goes right back to not being sensitive enough to those who are on fixed incomes. You have to justify why you're spending the funds. It was not done enough. I was only one person. I went to a couple seniors and they would ask me those questions. I said, did you know what we were doing with the lynch? No, I never heard any of that. So I put that information out. Did you hear that from administration? No. And
Do you
then
feel
part
like
up in
you're-
fighting.
Now that you said that Redmond is gonna go for another school bond, do you feel like you're gonna do things differently this time in terms of
I will not, if
sharing
I'm still on the
information?
board, I will not give my support to anything on there frivolous. When it comes to rebuilding Lynch, upgrading Obsidian like it needs to be, Tumalo and Tuck because of their age-wise, roofs, HVACs, and safety items, I'm all for it.
Mhm.
But if you start putting in extra money, and then a couple of the other board members say, well, we need that artificial turf, you're not gonna sell it to my generation, period.
Mhm.
There's no
So-
justification for it.
Let me kind of move on to a different question.
Sure.
So everybody knows that Redmond is booming. I mean, it's not a Oregon thing. I think people around the west know that people are moving. So, aside from the bond, what do you think the school board can do to prepare the community for the kind of growth that you guys are going to see, and what do you think that growth looks like? And I'll start with you. I started with Liz last time.
It goes right back to what I've been saying, you have to be more sensitive to seniors, because you look at the numbers, those that are coming in with still school-age children is pretty much stagnant. I think that we just talked about there's something like about 3, maybe 4% of those new people coming in. So the need to, the increased enrollment in our schools aren't going to be that much in the very near future. Fortunately, we've had another thing that's really helped our schools not have to, our district not have to build a lot is RPA. And that's another subject that I'm very high upon, because it's taken a lot of the strain off the district to put kids in RPA, because it's a different type of, not curriculum, but methodology of how they're instructing their
Redmond
students.
proficiency. Yeah.
Correct. It's a proficiency-based education, and not everybody does that, but the community in general likes that alternative as another part of education.
Sure.
The expansion of our CTE and STEM programs is another vital importance in our education system. Academics, I'm not going to put that as a back seat. No, we can marry the STEM and CTEs with academics. And what's a good example of that is the STEM and CTE program they have over in Salem. I don't know if you're familiar with that program or not, because what happened, they had a businessman that donated a 100,000 square foot building and gave it to the district for $1 a year, with the intention that they maintain it and staff it. And just about all the vocational programs that you can think of, they're almost all there, and they're adding more at the same time. And it's something for you to really look into, because most of our children, they need to go to either trade schools, community college, or they're going to go right directly into the job market. College and universities are very minimal as far as the percentage-wise of, and I'm not trying to knock them either, because for those who go through that need that type of education, it's very important. But the majority of our youth are not college and university bound.
Liz?
I think it is an exciting time to live in Redmond. There are so many great things that are happening there. And I think what the school district can do to help prepare for the growth is to make sure that our schools are welcoming to new people that are coming into our community, shoring up the great variety of offerings that our school district has. We have RPA, my son was a graduate of RPA, we have Ridgeview, we have Redmond, we have this great smorgasbord, this menu of places to find a fit for your student. And I think the school board needs to be actively engaged with the community. I think that will help prepare for growth. And being aware of issues that are facing our region. These booming populations that are coming, where are they gonna work? What are they gonna do? And I think that the school board needs to be at the table of these regional type of discussions in preparing for all these people.
Yeah.
But Redmond, I think is I am so proud of that town right now.
Just as a side note, I was on the design team for Ridgeview, and one of the things that I insisted on, and I had a lot of strange looks, is making sure they had plenty of natural light. If you've been to Ridgeview, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I want to touch on graduation rates. Of course, this is, and I think maybe you have alluded to your stance on what your approach, philosophically, whether or not this is something that is actually implemented under your membership on the school board. What is your philosophy about how to improve graduation rates in your district or even across the state?
We're doing that.
Well, did you
go ahead,
first that time?
Go ahead.
Can I go first?
Yeah.
I think graduation rates are improved when attendance is improved, and I think attendance is improved when a feeling of belonging happens for kids. If kids feel like they have a safe place to land, whether that's in a CTE program, whether that's in math club, band, student leadership, or an athletic team. If the kid look at the success that Madras has had, their high school, it's been phenomenal, and that's because they've really connected with kids at this level that gets them to come back because they have something invested in this building. Redmond High School has a 78% graduation record. That's not acceptable. Overall, the district as it is higher than that. Redmond High School has the lowest in our district. But every year, 93 kids don't. Last year, 93 kids didn't graduate from a Redmond High School. It's like, well, where did they go? What are they doing? And did we miss opportunities to get those kids folded into the family? Wraparound services of sorts. I mean, we know that kids are coming into our classrooms with all kinds of adverse childhood education experience or adverse childhood experiences that inform their learning in our classroom. And what can we do? What can we do to help mitigate the impact of those experiences that those kids have had? Out of 10, if a kid's coming into your classroom of these aces and they've got 6 out of the 10, can we really expect that they're going to graduate if they're not getting their really human needs met? So I think attendance is based on those kids wanting to be there, and getting those kids invested at what's happening in the building, getting them tied into some community that matters to them. And that's what Madras did, and I think it was their success has been phenomenal, and we should all be looking to that.
What Liz doesn't know, we're already addressing that problem. This last year, we've made some pretty good improvements in our graduation rate. The numbers would bear that out. Probably the highest in the district, which adds to it, is with RPA at 91%. So we look at that as kind of a model. Why are they so high? And a lot of it is because of the way they administer their programs. We're expanding the CTE and STEM at both schools. We're also now tracking, grades 3, 6, and 9, I believe. And 9 is basically, if we can get 9 that are on track for graduation at grade 9, then the chances that they're graduating is going to be higher. So that's one of the concerns that we've been dealing with on the board of late. Like I said earlier, we've had several meetings with the board, staff, and administration to address the problems. And I think if you look at the numbers, we have made some very good progress. and with the communications that we've established, and I've been a strong supporter of that, with the three sections collaborating with each other, we've made some pretty good success rates.
So earlier in the fall, I had the opportunity to work with some high school students, not just in Bend, but some in Redmond also. And one of the things that some of the Redmond students shared with me was that they felt that the schools in Bend offered more opportunities, or maybe more opportunities for them to have a voice in their district. And this is just a few students, so I understand this is not, representative of everyone, but it just made me wonder, what student-led efforts do you or would you support in kind of any realm to help them get a voice in how their education is carried out?
We have 3 student councils, one for each high school, that regularly attend our meetings at Redmond School Board. I think the councils are really doing well. They're trying to get their peers involved in it. And those that are probably complaining the most are probably those that are kind of on the out crowd, which you're going to have that no matter what you do. Mm-hmm. But those that are in leadership are making monumental strides to get as many kids to participate as possible. And one of the new things that is working on right now, and I think they're getting closer to goal, is buying new band uniforms for Redmond High School.
So my youngest son is graduating from Redmond this year, and he's been in leadership all 4 years. And he's also been in the band, and the uniforms that they're buying are beautiful, and it's been such a great community effort. But I do believe, and I see that there's a disconnect between the leadership stuff that's happening at the high schools, which is phenomenal. Those kids are awesome. They do great work. But wouldn't it be interesting to have a quarterly roundtable with the board and students? Mm-hmm. Or wouldn't it be interesting to have the board attend leadership meetings on a quarterly basis and just do some listening? Mm-hmm. And to just, that must be funny for you, but I think it might be an interesting idea. No. I mean, my son's friends come. I have 2 of his friends that are have actively asked to help on my campaign. I think there are a slice of those students that are very interested in the people who set the policy for the district. Mm-hmm. And I think that they should be encouraged to be involved. And I think just being involved at the high school level and high school leadership, planning the dances and buying, sending out the carnations on Valentine's Day, let's get them involved at the board level. I think it's a great opportunity to hear from the consumer. These kids are consuming the policy that the board is setting. Let's hear from them.
What's amusing to me on that, I tried to get that portion done. The hang up right now is the superintendent and administration. They don't want me in the schools at all.
Why do you think that is?
Because I might find out something that they don't want me to know about. That's my impression.
Well, I envision these sessions to be more of a listening where we as board members would...
That's what I've been advocating,
keep being quiet and listening to what it is that the kids are hearing and seeing. They might bring forward some things that we don't even have.
That's what I'm advocating, but like I said, our current superintendent has put a kibosh to a lot of that.
Let's say that the superintendent moves out of the way and you are able to get into the schools as you wish. What do you think what would you find?
You get the input from our young people. And from that, you have to analyze what are productive suggestions and what will work. If they don't work, you need to justify to them why it don't work. And if they're good ideas, you need to exploit them.
And you're telling me in the Redmond School District right now, school board members are not free to come and go within the schools as they wish?
I'm not.
You're not? Okay.
Because I've asked.
So there's 2 particular issues I think in Bend, for students in Bend, and I'm sorry, I have to be Bend-centric here, that students have come to us to say, these are issues we really care about. And I'm just curious where you fall on these issues, or how you might, as a board member, approach them. One is climate change and the other is gun violence in schools. So I don't know who wants to go first on those.
Could you speak to them?
Me?
Well,
Okay. Okay. I think climate change is real, and I think young people understand that moving forward, this will be their burden. What can schools do? I think they can do. What can school districts do? I think they can do quite a bit. Natural lighting at schools is a great place to start. I think green building opportunities. I think they have a pretty great recycling program happening in the cafeteria at Miller. Is that true? Does anybody here know? I think there are lots of ways for school districts to help students lead the charge on climate change. And I think gun safety, I think safe schools are important. We have laws on the books that need to be followed. We have, in Redmond particularly, we have lots of folks with guns in the homes, in their homes, and I think that securely keeping guns safe is a good idea.
The education on climate change has been blown totally out of proportion. Climate change has been going on throughout time. The biggest factor on climate change is the sun, not man. Does man have an effect on it? Maybe. Every computer model that has been put out has been wrong. So those are some of the attitudes that these young people are hearing from the media, that man is causing the climate to change almost overnight. It's not happening. Like I said, every computer model that's been out has been wrong. Back in the 1400s, they said if you sailed west, you're going to fall off the end of the earth, because scientific consensus said that's what it was. Was that right? No. And that's what's happening with now. Some of these scientists are saying that man is affecting climate change. Maybe. Are we cleaning it up? Yes. Are we cleaning it up enough? Jury's still out. Now, part of my, what I did along the way, I was part of the initial California smog program. I grew up in the greater Los Angeles area. And if you know anything about that, it's, Smog City, USA. It's better today than it was when I was a youngster. Why? Because we've addressed it. Have we addressed it enough? Like I said, jury's still out.
Do you think jury's still out on whether we've addressed it enough? I mean, I understand the arguments enough, but do you think we're doing enough?
Jury's still out on that too, because we don't know.
Sure.
And the only time we're going to tell is maybe another 100 years will tell us whether we were right or wrong, or did enough or not.
I'm not sure I want to gamble on that, and I think when you have 98% of scientists agree that this is a problem and this is a game changer for us, I mean, I don't want to wait till the jury's in that we are doomed.
98% of the scientists said the world was flat and was going to fall off the end of the world too. They were proved wrong.
How about gun violence?
In schools, particularly gun violence in schools, not the issue of guns as they pertain to the NRA or anything else, but
Those that are creating gun violence are those who have mental problems. Those who use gun responsibly know how to use gun, and what you're hearing, the biggest problem is those that are taking advantage and don't know how to use them and trying to make a name for themselves for whatever reason. But I think a lot of that is blown out of proportion. I'm all for having concealed carry and maybe have those that are qualified, and you notice how I say qualified, staff members be able to allow
Teachers.
Yes, or be able to allow to have weapons of what needs to be done in case there is a problem. That in itself is a deterrent. Now, what we have our service officers that are in our schools is a very huge deterrent. Those guys are also actively involved of teaching the responsibility of firearms. Let's face it, we're in a rural area, and there's basically just a few seasons: road repair season and hunting season. So, people need to know how to use guns responsibly, but you have, no matter where you're going to have a few that's gonna try to forego those situations. And to say that we're not acting responsibility, yeah, maybe a few are. But the education of what the NRA is trying to do is those that are being educated are the most responsible with their firearms, and those are not the ones that are causing problems.
You feel like the general gun-owning populace in Redmond is fairly well-trained and safe?
I do.
Kids shouldn't be concerned?
I do. Well, no, kids should be concerned, but they need to be taught be responsibly taught what they're all about.
Are they being responsibly taught right now?
Some are, some aren't. Is it enough? I don't know. Could we do more? Probably yes.
Do you think the school district should take more of a role in that?
I'd like to see them do more of a role, but I'm outvoted.
4-1.
Exactly.
I don't think teachers should I don't think staff should have guns.
Well, but like I said,
I don't think
the
any.
part of it is qualified. You get some people like, give you a good example of somebody at Redmond High School is Master Gunny, Trammell. Is he qualified? Absolutely. Would he be qualified to have concealed carry? Absolutely. Does he know everything there is about firearms? Absolutely. Is he going to use one irresponsibly? No.
Would you be concerned about the fact that then there's access to a firearm on the school property that someone else can use?
They should be responsibly put in a situation where those that, the only one people should know where they're at are those that are qualified to use them.
Mm-hmm.
The police should know where they're at, and administration, maybe the principal, possibly the vice principal. Everybody else doesn't have a need to know.
Mm-hmm.
We've only got a couple minutes left. If we could, if you'd summarize again anything that we might have missed that you feel is important to your position, and I think we can start with Liz and start with you on this one.
4 years ago, when I started on the board, I advocated 3 things. One of them is starting to take effect. We now have an AD for both schools because there's been some inequities in our competitive athletics. So that's
athletic director.
It's being addressed. Still not like it needs to be, but it's being addressed. The other 2 kind of go hand in hand. Volunteers, the seniors and veterans in the community have a great wealth to be able to volunteer to help the schools, because I do believe it's the community that educates all of our children. The one program that our superintendent refused to administer correctly is the SMART program. He administers that as an after-school program, as an augmented program. That's fine, but that's not how the program was designed. It's designed to be put in-house for those who are having difficulties. He refuses to change that. I've called him on it several times. I've been to state meetings, and everybody that I've talked to says it's designed to run in-house during school time hours. After school, the problem is with after school, particularly in our area, there are some kids that can't stay after school for various reasons. Transportation, going out and have to help out on the farms, because we have a lot of those. So when they need help, they need it during class, not after school. So those are the 3 things that I've been working on. Like I said, they made a lot of progress on veterans and competitive athletics. But the others are still, in my opinion, needs a lot of work done on it. And I'm going to continue to advocate to have those worked on, because all it's going to do is help everybody in the community and the district.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time today. I appreciate it. And thank you. It was good to chat with you. Public schools are important, and the time and effort that a community spends caring about school districts and our students is important. Redmond is growing and it's changing, and what we do now to prepare our schools for the future is critical. As a school board member, I would prioritize planning for growth, prudent fiscal responsibility, supporting our teachers. They deserve respect. They deserve opportunity to develop professionally. And I believe that prioritizing an equitable and quality education for all students is important. I'm passionate about Redmond, and I'm committed to throwing everything I have at a school district right now. So thanks.
Thank you.
Well, like I said to start, I really appreciate both of you, your commitment to getting in and doing things like this, and being willing to speak with everybody, and being willing to serve. So thank
And
you.
driving to Bend for this interview.
Right.
Thank